Thank you very much, John. And let me invite the rest of the panel to come and join us on the stage now as well. Now, firstly, I suppose on behalf of all of the trade press journalists in the room, I should just say, John, thank you very much for the piece of shit quote. We've already rewritten the intro on our Fairfax story. Now, let me, and you're welcome to go online and check whether that's true or not. Let me tell you about the rest of our panel, starting with Nicole Sheffield. Nicole is CEO of NewsLifeMedia, previously known to many of us as news magazines. She did a 7-year stint as group publisher at Pacific Magazines before becoming GM of the lifestyle channels, so she knows lifestyle and magazines. Simon Davies is head of publishing at OMD. In a previous life, he was group sales director at Murdoch Magazine, so he's been both sides of the fence. Also with us on the panel, Mark Crowe. He's CEO of AMI. Now, in this case, it's the Australian Marketing Institute, not the Advanced Medical Institute, so Mark is not to blame for those longer-lasting sex ads. And also on the panel, Treweek is MD of Street Press Australia, who's rapidly become the go-to man whenever you want to talk to a publisher who's championing free iPad editions. 2 panels ago, when I was with Craig, I was arguing that paid was the model to go with our Encore iPad app, and he was arguing free, and by the time we were next on a panel, he talked me round and we were free, so he's quite persuasive. Loads of questions from you, I hope. I don't think thus far we've had a hashtag as such, so I've made one up. So if you do want to tweet a question, audit Q, and I'll remind you of that a couple of times, but audit Q, and I'll know that there's a question on that. And obviously the old-fashioned thing of waving your hand is also highly acceptable as well, and I think you'll get priority for being braver as well. So, and we'll go to questions quite early, so do start to have a think about them. But I'm going to just throw one in to get us going. Let me ask all of the panel. I'm going to start with Craig, as you're over at the far end. What was the last magazine and the last newspaper that you read the print edition of? And then the same question for digital as well.
I should say one of my magazines, I guess, but it was actually the Monthly last night. I think that's a great champion of the written word. Last newspaper, I'm a devourer of the printed form of the weekend papers, so any of the 4 on the weekend. Digital my site, themusic.com.au, earlier today, and then the iPad editions of my magazines.
John, same question to you.
I'm a voracious reader of both the print and electronic versions of most things. I look at every print edition of the newspaper every day, all 4 of them. I look at various .com versions as well. On the weekend I look at both versions. I read tons of cooking, lifestyle, travel, homemaker magazines.
And I'm going to force you to name a couple. What was the last newspaper you read before you came out the door this morning?
Herald.
Mark?
Not like John, I'm a big reader of both print and online, and I always make a point of comparing print to online versions because the way the news is delivered can be quite different, the Herald being a great example. But in terms of last print copy read, in fact I was in Dallas last week, so it was the Dallas Morning Star. And magazine, I hate to say it, but I'll toe the company line, it was Professional Marketing. Online, the Herald. Yeah.
And Nicole?
Well...
And you can't obviously name one of your own.
Yeah, I'm not allowed to say my own.
No, you're going to have to rule that out, I'm afraid.
Oh, really? Oh, go to Simon, I need to think. Because we've got the best. Okay, not my own. Well, I did have to be Famous for a magazine. I love Famous. And in terms of the iPad app, it's not my own. I can't say Taste. It was... Oh.
Well, you just kind of did.
Yeah, I did. And The Australian as far as the printed edition this morning.
Nice to keep it in the family.
Yeah.
Simon?
In terms of prints, newspapers would have been Fin Review, magazines would have been Cycling Weekly from the UK, which is probably not lots of people's first choice. Online it would have been The Guardian and Fast Company on the iPad.
Okay, well that gets us warmed up. Now, does anyone want to come in with an early question? Probably have a few, and we have a couple of roving microphones going around, so give me a hand. And I think, no, that was someone scratching their nose. You nearly got called. It's like being in an auction, isn't it? You'll find you bought it if you're not careful. I have plenty of questions that I want to ask if no one wants to come in at this stage. And just sort of feel free to wave your hand at any point during the conversation if you want to come in. Now, this is just something I stumbled onto a website this week. I was looking at someone's media kit website called Pedestrian TV, and it included the phrase, and this is off the top of my head, but this is pretty much it. And I apologise because this is becoming the theme of the morning. Their words were, if a publisher tells you that their site isn't audited, don't believe them because they're full of shit. So my question, I suppose, to all of the panel is, are publishers full of shit if they're not audited? And the more wide question, can a publisher justify not auditing their circulations, whether print, whether digital? And do advertisers actually ask enough questions when it comes to accountability? And Mark, waving the advertiser flag, I'm going to ask you to come at that one first.
Well, I think it all comes down to asking questions. If you're not auditing, you must ask why, and you should take great interest in the answer. But it's also about education, and I'll be blunt, often marketers don't know enough about audits and what are the questions they should be asking. So, I mean, what they think of the answers, I don't know.
Okay, over to you, Nicole.
Well, I mean, we obviously have two magazines that aren't audited, which is Golf Digest and GQ, but those readership numbers are actually what advertisers are interested in, and that's what they buy off. So it really, I think it does depend on the product, the environment that you create, and whether it's a cross-platform solution. I mean, a lot of what John said earlier, I mean, metrics at the moment, because they're so defined by the industry and category they're in, are often left to interpretation. It largely depends not only on the marketer but on the agency. So there's a lot of factors, but really, I mean, at the end of the day, people want a return on investment. They want to understand what the numbers are. Whether they're audited or not really is dependent on what their intention is.
Well, Simon, let's pick on. Sorry, I'll come to you in a second, Craig. Simon, just to build on Nicole's point, would you be more likely to invest more advertiser dollars, or recommend to invest more advertiser dollars in GQ, for instance, if it was audited?
I think in that instance, probably not, in the sense that we have got a third-party metric there anyway.
So readership is enough?
So, you're talking about quite a specialist marketplace, and yes, that covers it off. The broader question is, we would see auditing as third-party reporting in terms of its broader sense. So it's having that third-party reporting. We don't really see any reason or excuse for not having any measurement of any type. And in instances where that is the case, the price you would pay is going to be related to that, which essentially we would see very little value in that.
Sorry, Craig, I cut you a bit short there.
I think that decision is made by the marketers. As a niche publisher, I audit 95% of my titles, but I said the same agency money going to unaudited titles, so it often makes me question whether I'm doing the right thing. I think too that our hosts are facing some real challenges in how we audit total masthead. I've looked at the ABC, I'm actually sitting on the CAB panel, and I have concerns about how we're going to fit into that. And then again, our hosts, it is getting that message to agencies about just, they are full of shit. But if you keep believing them, then they're going to continue what they do.
John, there's a lot to build up on there.
Oh, sure. I would say up front that I'm always going to encourage transparency and accountability. So yes, you're going to be suspicious if someone doesn't want to audit, and you should be asking the questions, to Mark's point earlier. That said, when it comes to websites and the digital stuff versus print, you do have other ways of measuring what's going on. So clients actually don't care as much about the audit as they do about the result that's generating for their business. So if you've got other proxies for assessing the impact of the effectiveness of that vehicle, then typically that's what people are going to look to. And otherwise it comes back to, yes, education, ignorance, and not asking the right questions and slipping through the net.
How often does a client actually ask you about audit, or is it just something that
There's a spectrum of clients. There are some that are ultra sophisticated and do nothing but that, and they specialise in media. There are others that have got so many things to think about. The media conversation is, if it's 10% of their total job description, that's being generous. So, and you can't expect them to have the same level of knowledge as someone that focuses on it day to day.
Okay, well, just a reminder of the hashtag if you want to get in the question, AuditQ. And again, I'm just looking for a question if anyone does want to bravely throw a question in. And funny enough, I bumped into a couple of people outside who said, I want to ask such and such. So I know there are people there, but no one wants to be the first. But I do see a hand kind of tentatively in the air. There we go. There's a microphone coming your way. If you wouldn't mind telling us who you are and where you're from, please.
Yes, good morning. My name is Harsh Agarwal. I represent Vision Asia. We're a South Asian pay television company here in Australia and New Zealand. As part of our services, we also provide a monthly subscribed magazine to our subscribers. And as we continue to grow on that business, I guess one of the questions that I would like to ask you is, what do you think the audit plays in terms of the life stages of different magazines or periodicals, startups versus more established periodicals, and how important the audits are?
Good question. We might start from this end this time around, Simon. So when you see a new magazine in the market, how soon before you want to start seeing third-party data?
Yeah, I think certainly our expectation around launches is that, after 6 months there would be a figure coming into market. And I think with most sort of particularly monthly magazines or weekly magazines, that's reasonable. People who are choosing to take longer to report than that, we would be asking, why that is, and expect to have a discussion around that.
Nicole?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that in terms of the magazine world, I look back when I was in pay TV, we launched Lifestyle U, and I knew within 8 days of that launch, I had full ratings data. And that meant that all of our advertisers had access to that ratings data, and agencies, etc. And I guess that 6 months feels like a long time today. But I think the quicker you can get metrics, the quicker you can actually have reasonable conversations. So, but how you go about doing that, I think that has to evolve.
Mark?
Well, a theme today is no one has time anymore, and I think the opportunity to have 2 or 3 year publishing strategies is very limited. But it gets back to managing the now, but also maintaining the consistent story that where we are now and where we'll be in the future can be married.
And John?
Just a total different tangent. Launching anything today is a nightmare because no one has, as we said, time or attention. The big issue is how do you create any disruption or any level of interest in the fact that you're launching anything in the first place? And, everyone is increasingly cynical. Why do we need it? Surely we've got enough choice already. So just having that whole gap analysis, why it even has a chance of success up front, really needs to be thought through very carefully. And then you need to really think through, how do I get through to people? How do I even get them to know that it's happening? That's a huge challenge for people that exist already, let alone new entrants into the marketplace.
All our publications are free, so we audit them all at the first. We set our own circulation, so we audit at the first opportunity. I think the interesting experience for us was launching an iPad, Australia's first iPad-only magazine. Those numbers, it seems all of us are keeping quite close to our chest until we feel they're at a level that's going to attract agencies. The problem I have with things like that magazine was rated top 20 in the world. We're a small Australian publisher sitting alongside Condé Nast, National Geographic, publishers like that at New York Publishers Week, and I can't even get that message out because even with that, we've got 11,000 subscribers, and as I'm hearing under other numbers, that's quite a lot. So as we go into digital platform magazines, there's going to be a real difficulty in convincing agencies of the worth of those off those low numbers. So it depends on what you're doing.
Yeah, this is an interesting point, I think, Craig. Is what sort of conversations are you getting to have when you walk into the agencies, or are you not even getting through the door?
We do well in the sense, as a percentage of print subscription, our Sydney-based title, which is weekly, has grown by 50% on the iPad. We have over 15,000 subscribers on a weekly basis off a 34,000 print run. So it's a fantastic opportunity. Our biggest problem with agencies is that disconnect between how they're going to treat the iPad. Is it the print division? Is it the digital division? Just talking about the way we audit and metric things, we'll have a reader who reads the paper and then goes and checks on the iPad because we've changed the content, we've enhanced that content. Is that 2 readers or is it 1? The agencies have the opportunity to deliver different forms of advertising on those 2 platforms. Quite often for us, it's just who do we speak to understand how we do them.
How do you organise yourselves, John? Where would that conversation be had within your team?
It would, well, the way we're structured is around client groups, and within those client groups we have specialisation within it. So we are different to some agencies that are very siloed in terms of the specialisation by media type, and the reason we are is because this whole of customer approach that I talked about earlier means that you need someone that can look across the whole thing. So we still have specialists within, client groups that are either print or digital, but there are other people over above that that's meant to bridge the gap, and they sit together. So the digital and the print people would be sitting next to each other, so hopefully they will have a conversation. But it's certainly not perfect yet, and there is tons of work that will continue to be done on that to get it right as things become more grey. And I think that's the other thing you'd mentioned, these neat little boxes that, the future doesn't fit into the containers of the past, as they say. This notion that people just do discrete bits of something is becoming ridiculously redundant. People need to be able to look across a spectrum. Talk about T's, you've got a broad sort of, but then you go deep within a specific expertise. So no matter how deep this expertise is, you still need to know where that fits and who else to talk to connect the dots.
Now, Simon, I'm going to put that same question to you. You, at some point, I noticed that your title subtly changed from head of print to head of publishing, which presumably is to address this sort of question.
Yeah, I think the thing with it is a bit of a grey area, but equally it's also a bit of a grey area on the publisher side that, depending on who the publisher is, we've got some teams where it's the digital teams presenting iPad opportunities, some it's the print teams, and on top of that you've got different ad models as well. So you've got some iPad apps that replicate the advertising in the magazine or newspaper, so effectively they become an extension of a print campaign. You've got others that are selling it separately, so it's not just a grey area in terms of at the media agency side. I think it is as an industry, and we're all waiting to see how that sort of develops.
Nicole, you're obviously coming at it from the opposite side of that conversation, where your people are going in and trying to have, I suppose, just one conversation regardless of platform.
Yeah. Look, and we're in the throes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, just to check, can everyone hear Nicole? I'm not sure if your microphone is working.
Is it working? Sorry. Is that better?
No.
Can everyone hear me, Nicole? Can we maybe get one of the spare handhelds onto stage, please? We might make use of that. I'll tell you, we'll come back to you in a second. Oh yeah, there we go. Here comes a. Thank you for that.
I was just saying that we've actually just very recently restructured our business to be very customer-centric as opposed to brand-centric, which is not dissimilar to what most publishers have restructured. And it's a really interesting challenge, because the idea, of course, is that they have an intimate relationship with the agencies and their clients, and so they'll be able to create customer solutions. But what I think in the process we need to understand is that because we represent mastheads, we represent brands, that deep and intimate understanding of what that brand represents sometimes gets lost. And what we're in the process at the moment of that transition of making sure that deep understanding of that brand isn't lost. So we're creating customer solutions that are relevant, and it isn't perfect. I think that a lot of the publishers are struggling. All of us have many times restructured our sales teams to make sure that we get the right solution, and I don't know that there is an easy answer, because as the world fragments and there are lots of different solutions, and customers' needs change, we're just going to have to be really adaptable.
Now, we'll carry on exploring that point a bit. I will come to you in a moment, Mark, but let me just throw that back to John and Simon to build on that. Do you really want to see sort of one face from each organisation? Does that actually work for you?
It depends on who in my organisation you're talking to. So, there are some people that want to have a strategic conversation that's whole of customer across whatever. There are other people that are more about creative solutions, that are, coming up with breakthrough ideas. There are other people that are specifically responsible for driving the investment conversation and making sure it's as efficient as possible. So I think that's the big challenge, is getting the people on the sales side to mirror their equivalent on the agency or client side, so the right people are having the right conversation at the right time. The one hat fits all things sort of really difficult.
And Simon, I think maybe even this time last year we found ourselves in a panel debate about this issue of publishers getting in and seeing agencies and finding the time.
Yeah, I think certainly the move to having the broader kind of group selling approach is positive. I think that the challenge from the publisher point of view is that you're going from having whatever it might be, 10 or 20 or 30 points of contact, to having 1 or 2. And, you know, if you've got 10 or 20, the chances of some of them being good and having the right conversations are a lot higher than, you know, if you get it wrong around the 1 or 2 people that are the contact. But assuming you've got the right person there with the right skill set and the ability to sort of talk across the platforms and understand the platforms they're selling, we see it as definitely beneficial.
Okay, another opportunity to ask a question if anybody wants to. Just give us a wave of a hand if you do. I don't immediately see one. Last chance, so I'm going to ask another one myself. Okay, let's talk about engagement, which to me is going to be it's already becoming a key conversation. It's going to become one of the key conversations when you're trying to persuade people, for instance, that somebody looking at an iPad ad is more valuable than someone looking at a display ad on a website or whatever. So for all of the panel, how would you define engagement, and how can you or should you measure engagement? And Mark, I'm going to start with you this time.
It's a word that gets thrown around a lot at the moment, engagement, that's for sure, and it sort of reminds me of what we were talking about when we referred to loyalty.
Can't hit the mic.
It gets thrown around a lot at the moment, the word engagement, and people do like using it, and it's as much as people used to like using loyalty as a term as well, without perhaps really thinking about what it means. Engagement, in many respects, is, you know, getting back to what it is the customer wants and what type of experience, and whether you can deliver that experience. Engagement can be at any number of levels. I think we too often try and define that in terms of what all our customers need. We talk about 8.6 million as a figure. Are they engaged? What type of engagement do they want? Is it a quality or quantity issue? I think it's all about quality and experience.
Craig, I'm going to go to you next, because I think this is, for me, I think this is the thing that will decide whether iPad magazines succeed or fail, is whether you can sell the engagement message.
Yeah, I certainly think both across web and the digital editions of our magazine that engagement is going to become our currency as such. As digital publishing solutions become easier, web is already very easy. There's so much content out there, the ability to engage with the audience becomes vital. Measuring that is obviously a totally different thing, and how we're able to measure that and show that to our clients on a direct basis. We know, rather outside of agency world, but on a direct basis, our venue, our label, music label clients are very interested in how often an article is shared about an artist, whether ads set in relation to that article, etc. So I think that the digital opportunity, especially with the iPad, is to, you know, I can see how long someone spends, and what it will do, I think, where we'll get measurement of engagement of magazine and printed content, is I can tell what's working now. I've got enough numbers on the iPad to know what works and what doesn't. And by making the presumption that people that read certain things on the iPad also read them in print, I'm starting to restructure and change my magazines and my content based on that. And when you talked about real-time stuff, we can't do that with a physical newspaper, but by taking the iPad statistics, we can start to make changes that will reflect in the printed product.
John, are you accepting engagement arguments, or are you just going to try and beat down the price on CPM?
No, of course I am. I'm not. It's all about value. It's not about price. I would say up front that I do not believe it is possible to have a single industry engagement metric, and I think any attempt to try and create that is a complete waste of time. The reality is client deliverables are so different, even within clients, that to come up with one proxy thing that works across every client and every category is a complete nonsense. The other comment I'd say is engagement is important, but engagement is a means to an end. So it's not the engagement that's important, it's what the engagement goes on to do that is important. So without giving all of our crown jewels away, you know, we focus on intent. Our tracker is all about measuring intent, whether it's purchase, whatever, searching, whatever the client wants to generate. And then the conversation is, well, what function was engagement as a means to get that intent? And that's where the modelling and the analysis becomes really interesting. But I'm certainly not waiting around for the industry to come up with some sort of engagement metric, because not going to happen.
Simon, then Nicole.
Yeah, well, I think going back to your first question, which is about, you know, how would you interpret engagement, is probably a key thing, because, you know, if we asked everyone to write it down on a piece of paper, we'd get, yeah, a lot of different answers. So you have conversations where people are using the same word but have got very different meanings as to what that is. And I agree with John that how we see engagement is very much based around kind of action and result. You look sort of at Craig's business where you kind of know people are actively picking up and going to events, and by default there's a high level of engagement there. How you actually measure that, it's harder, but there's sort of a gut feel there, and it's because there's an action. It's the same with something like Taste, where you can get physical numbers of people who have searched for a recipe on with sausages on a Tuesday night. That's a real measurement of engagement. It's not an industry-wide metric, but it gives you real kind of insight into how people are using the mediums.
Nicole.
Yeah, well, I think as to what John said in his speech earlier was really interesting, that engagement, the magazine industry owned that and really worked that so well for so long. Now, as the panellists have said, it unfortunately is an overused term, and everyone defines it very differently. I think what's exciting for us now, and having 4 years out of magazines and coming back, I'm still very passionately excited about the future of magazines, because let alone, if you just look at our circulation figures alone, 7 million magazines were sold last month. That shows that people pay for those products. That in itself is the first step in realising how important those products are and how engaged those people are. And I think for us, how you actually measure that as an industry, I think we probably won't be able to do that, and whatever we say, people will doubt us. The challenge is how you convert that relationship into a tangible result for clients, and that is our challenge as an industry. I feel quite excited that the NPA is coming together and very focused on improving what we stand for and what magazines stand for. But really, I think we started the engagement story. We're going to evolve the engagement story.
Good. I'm glad you mentioned the NPA, actually. Pretty much. Again, it might well have been the equivalent of this conference last year. Nick Chan, or maybe it was the Publishers Australia conference, spoke on the panel and put his hand up as chairman of the NPA, also boss of Pacific Mags as well, and said, as an industry, the magazine industry has been hopeless at marketing itself. Is that a fair criticism?
Yeah.
I'll stay with you first, Nicole, and then I'll...
Damn. Yeah, you know what? I remember watching that because it was on, I think it was on Mumbrella, you had it, and I rewatched it so many times and texting Nick going, oh, thanks, I really want to come back. Look, I think he's absolutely right. I think that the magazine industry was so caught up in competing with each other that they didn't realise that the pie was changing and the space was changing. And in fact, if you talk to a lot of magazine reps, and even if you talk to agencies, I often hear the story that they can so confidently compare their product to another magazine product. But you ask them to compare magazines to the outdoor industry or to radio, who have grown significantly, and really those metrics, I think, also are rather questionable. We can't. And I think that's when Nick said that. He's talking about the fact that we've been so caught up in the fight between each other, the Pack Mags, ACP, News Mags, that fight, that actually we forgot the customer and we forgot the experience that we were actually delivering. And really, we can't deliver that on our own. No one can, but we are really socially engaged, and I think that a lot of those brands have a massive social following. We need to harness that. Digital does come in many forms. It isn't just websites. We have incredible engagement with our websites as well. It's how we package that and really start to provide different consumer experiences, because ultimately people trust us because of the brands we represent and the mastheads we represent.
And you personally, in your role, are now in a position to do something about this. What are you going to do?
I'm doing lots, and it's a lot of fun, and it's really hard. It's really hard because you've got to change. Not only do you have to change perception, you actually have to change behaviour. And that's probably the hardest thing to change. But if I take the example of Vogue, we're relaunching vogue.com.au September 1. Most people go, oh, well, they're just relaunching a website. We're actually not. We're relaunching the entire way we publish Vogue. Edwina has set up, she's completely responsible, not just for that magazine, for that website, for every bit of... Edwina McCann is the editor. And she's responsible for every element of that, even in terms of, if you look at, real-time metrics. We have plasma TVs in that office that have their Google chart
charts and Chartbeat on everyone's desktop. Everyone is not measured on their print deadlines because that's just one deadline. They need to be posting 4 times a day at a minimum. They need to be absolutely engaged with everything that consumer is doing, because Vogue needs to stand for more than a printed product. It's a platform, and really that's what we're going to be doing across our entire business, making sure that we take those valuable brands that have a massive print heritage and rebuilding them as platforms.
John, someone on Twitter has just said that you're great value.
That's a bit distracting.
And you were just saying that you wanted to buy on value as well, so there you go.
Okay, sorry, what was the question again, Tim?
I had no idea you were such a sucker for a small amount of
Look, I get praised so infrequently, I've just got to suck it up when I do.
People say that media agency bosses have big egos.
Oh, well, that's not true. God, what are you talking about? So, yeah, what was the question?
The magazine industry and how it markets itself as a medium.
Yes, I don't think it has marketed itself. I agree with your comment. It's been far too introspective. And, look, there have been attempts. The whole ACP I Love Magazines thing was interesting, and I appeared in that campaign. And I didn't appear in it because I do love magazines, and I actually passionately believe in that. The comment I made then, and I made it very passionately to ACP at the time, was it still doesn't go on. I love magazines, so what? Is the next question. It still didn't answer the so what, the link to commercial success, etc., that I've been raving on about again this morning. So it's great having fluffy, whatever, feel-good stuff, but that needs to then lead to something tangible, and that's the big thing that the industry needs to do right now.
Craig, you're a magazine publisher.
Yeah, publishers were our own worst enemies from a competitive point of view. When I entered the industry in '98, there was about 500,000 what could be called youth street press being published each week, and I approached my fellow publishers and said, let's take that message out, then battle for the individual business behind that. It couldn't be done. We couldn't get that message out. I recently wrote an article for our site called "The Rumours of Our Death Are Grossly Exaggerated," off the back of how Fairfax and news have been affecting us. I went to your conference, saw Harold say the words, "Print is dead," and what's going on around that. This is affecting us all, but as we say, we don't go out there and promote how successful our businesses are against other mediums. We're too focused on where we sit and the challenges we face, which are massive. But we actually have the people, the resources as a group to meet those challenges and forge headlong against whether it be television, radio. And I don't think as a group we get that out often enough.
Mark, your members are marketers. Do you think they feel that they are seeing the media marketed to them?
I think one of the problems with media is that there was always the conversation about we own this space. And when you own the space, you can become lazy, you become introspective. The space is no longer owned. And that's the same for marketing. Marketers no longer own marketing within a business. It's an orientation now, marketing. And for marketers, that means they're no longer owners. They have to be leaders. And I think this is what it comes all down to, is leadership. And whether that's in media or marketing, you need to demonstrate leadership, you need to demonstrate understanding. And I think when it comes to media clients, it's also understanding the client's customers, because they're as much owners now as anyone is. So the whole thing's really turned upside down. It's no longer an introspective thing. It's very much for marketing about orientation, and marketers looking for people who can help them in terms of that leadership challenge.
Okay, I'm going to come to Simon on that question, then back to the floor. So Simon, then John, then back to the floor. Simon, I think you appeared in that campaign as well, didn't you?
No, I wasn't in the campaign.
Well, you weren't.
I had the
I'll let
debate
you
with
answer.
Nick about
So you weren't asked. Did that hurt?
Yeah, that's right. I think they had their quota of bald people in that one.
Is that what they told you?
I mean, I think just one thing, talking about sort of magazines and how they've marketed themselves, I don't think there's anyone that would disagree that there hasn't been a great job done there. But the point Nicole touched on before about the fact that consumer magazines essentially are paid-for medium, and when you're talking about levels of engagement, most of us are lucky enough we don't have to pay for our magazines. But if you go into a news agency, magazines are actually quite expensive as well. So the fact that people are shelling out that money in what are fairly tough consumer times is an incredibly powerful measure of engagement for the medium, but it's just been kind of lost altogether, and I don't think it's been pushed or promoted at all.
John?
Sorry, I just wanted to come back to a point that I think you made about Harold's print is dead comment, which is great for column centimetres, but not necessarily true.
And in fairness to Harold, it was slightly more nuanced than
Was
that
it?
as well. As I'm sure he would have told his client Fairfax.
Oh, since when was anyone fair to Harold? Anyway, so the analogy I just made, or the comparison, everyone said TV was dying too. Free-to-air television, I think, died, or was meant to have died, according to the press, 5 years or more ago. And yet, in this country, television viewing has actually increased, and that's before you factor in all the other stuff we can't measure yet, IPTV, etc. So it's in your hands. Like, if you want to accept that print is dying and just let it die a slow death, great, up to you. Or if you want to do something about it, as Television Land did and reinvigorated itself and launched digital and launched cross-platform and everything else that's happened, well, get off your asses and do something about it. So don't accept that print has to die. It doesn't.
Now, I think I saw a hand somewhere up towards the back there, and if you could tell us who you are and where you're from, please.
John Blondin from Media Titles. I'd like to stick on this topic and ask Mark Crowe the question from the Australian Marketing Institute. I'm a passionate magazine man, as Mark would know, but I was very thrilled to read recently the results of a survey undertaken by the Australian Marketing Institute, where it approached many senior marketing executives regarding the media mix, and magazines really came up in a very positive light, with a percentage increase in attitude and optimistic observance as to where they stand in the marketing budgets of the future. Could you tell us a little bit about the survey and the terms of reference of that survey, Mark?
You planted that
Yes,
one,
John.
didn't you, Mark?
What's that?
You planted that question, didn't you?
Look, it's a survey we do annually. We've done it for the last 4 years now. 1,300 senior marketers, members of our organisation, CMOs, decision makers. And we ask them a number of questions about what they're forecasting, how they're feeling, sentiment, etc. And it's interesting because often there's a lot of interest in what's happening in the media. And the media always loves a story about winners and losers. And constantly coming through our research is it's not about winning and losing, it's about relativity. And constantly, traditional media is very strong. It's not growing at the moment as quickly as some of the new media, but it's still growing. You've only got to look at the media rights deal for rugby league the other day to see how much money is still being invested in some of the traditional media. They're now selling, looking to sell the mobile marketing side of that sport. The money there is nowhere near as big as the free-to-air rights. So I think there's a bit of a story there too. So we're not so much involved in the winner and loser approach, who's benefiting, who's not. It's about the overall marketing message. And people talk about social media strategy. They talk about new media strategy. We should just all be talking about business strategy and where those various media channels can fit in. People ask, what should I be doing in the new media space? Well, tell us what your business strategy is, and we might be able to come up with a right answer for you. And it's not about right answers, it's about coming up with an approach that may improve business performance. Don't get hung up on right answers, or we can't be perfect in our measurement. For God's sake, accounting's not perfect in its measurement, but it's still highly regarded. So don't get caught in that argument about, the silver bullet metric, because it just doesn't exist. It never will. If it was this easy, we wouldn't need to be here. It'd be all too easy.
Does anyone else on the panel want to come in on that one?
I think one of the problems we have is, as a publisher, we're rushing to new media. We're the first on the iPad, etc. like that. I look back at the last 12 months' experience we've had, and in doing that, we've actually let down traditional media. We've let down our magazines a little bit. We've just done a redesign this week based on things that were creeping through that came from that rush to new media, and I'm not sure of other publishers in the audience, but just be really careful as you go forward that, as these guys are saying, there's massive value to traditional print media, and I think some of us have gone too far forward rather than making sure that still is the groundwork and the basis of everything we do in the so-called new media.
Okay, now let's build up on a point that John made, but as I have a keen hand in the air, I'll get you to identify yourself and tell us who you are and where you're from.
John Graham from Haverfield, is that what you meant? No, from Gap Research. John spoke very eloquently and very passionately, and there's two words from what he said that really stuck with me. One was results and speed. Now, we've talked about wonderful things like engagement, and Mark, I totally agree with you about the silver bullet. It doesn't exist. But speed. We know there's 18 million newspapers a week. We know there's 7 million magazines, and we get the results 3, 4, 5, 6 months later. What can we do collectively? Now, I've sat in these audit bureau meetings for years, and there's always reasons why we can't get it out quicker. And I think it's this, we've got to get exactly the correct number. I'd rather have something that's bloody close and fast. What can we do to get this data out faster so clients can use the bloody data so we can work out what happened yesterday or last week and not work out what happened 6 months ago?
Something of a real world question there. John.
Yes, I'll solve the whole industry's problem in a sentence. I would like to examine whether there's another methodology that could collect daily data on what... I mean, God, everyone's got a mobile phone, and yes, I know there's 5 million bloody methodological reasons why that might not work, but how hard would it be for me to remember, gee, I read the Herald, I did this, I did that, and I looked at whatever, House and Garden today, and that might be enough. And that might be enough to feed into a dashboard or whatever to go, okay, well, there were 100,000 of these bastards, and that's going to give me some sort of proxy for the result I got from that activity today. And then, yes, in 3 months' time, you might want a nice bow to wrap that around where you know what the total readership was. But in the meantime, can we come up with some sort of real-time proxy for readership on a daily basis, across the major titles at least?
I think the funny thing is, when we go and do our 6-month audits, that information is available to us on a daily basis or a weekly basis. How I do it with print and extending to online, it's all going to be there. It just, at the end of 6 months, I put it all together and send it off for it to be audited. That information's available. The CAB, the ABC's responsibility is to find, as members, a way that we can get that out quicker. I think you're exactly right.
It's not their issue. Most people don't want to do that. That's been the whole debate.
But anyway. I think that's the publishers who traditionally don't want to audit as well.
Mark,
if the CAB provide the ability, we'll audit, and you guys stop advertising with those that don't.
Mark, you were nodding at John's point in particular.
Oh, look, I think, you know, we talk about daily whatever. I mean, I think sometimes we need to just step back a bit and analyse. We're very much caught up in chasing our tails at times. You know, you talk to people in industry all the time, how's things, how are you going? We're just flat out. It's sometimes worth asking, what are you flat out doing? And sometimes people sort of stop and pause and think, oh, I haven't had enough time to really think about that. I'm just responding. And I think sometimes we do need to take a step back and just think about, hang on, where are we? Where are we going? Let's just, I mean, I don't think, you know, not responding within 1 hour, 24 hours is going to be the end of the world. It's been proven not to be. And it's, I think that's the problem. The whole industry is just caught up in this swirl at the moment, and there's no clarity. People are just getting through to the end of the day, end of the week, the month, and there's a lot of pressure. I mean, the economy is tough. The financial markets demand immediacy. But sometimes I think you can take a step back and just take a wider view of things. But I still think from an industry perspective, whether that's marketing, whether it's media, we do need to take leadership, and we need to have a larger voice, and we need to talk about it in this room, but we also need to talk about it to the top end of town, because at the moment the top end of town aren't hearing what's being said in this room.
Okay, I'm going to come to Simon, then to Nicole. Simon, John's saying a kind of daily dashboard. Would you support that?
Yeah, I think the key thing is there needs to be a desire from the publisher side to provide that information as well, and certainly we've found that hasn't tended to be the case. And I think, you know, there have been a number of comments today about kind of inherited business models, if you like, and I think this is probably another example of that where there are metrics that have been in place for a long period of time, and there's kind of adjustments to make them more up to date, but we've still got a measurement system that's based on a media business that existed 10 years ago rather than today.
But you commit OMD to helping fund that dashboard.
Sorry?
You'd commit OMD to help fund the dashboard.
If we're getting, you know, the right information that's relevant and usable, then that's a benefit to our clients, and yes, we'd fund that.
That wasn't the answer I expected, actually.
The challenge is that generally it's hard to get that information.
Nicole, why won't you let him have his information?
It's all my fault. No, it's that damn Nick Chan. No, look, I think that the world has changed. I think the MPA, we are very much focused on relaunching the MPA and relooking at everything. We understand the importance of looking at our metrics. We are working closer together, and obviously, we understand the problem at hand and we want to move quickly, and we're in the process of working through that solution, which will be launched very, very soon.
I'm not sure if Paul's in the room. We're kind of out of time, but I want to know if I have permission to ask one more question. The first person was the loudest, so I'm going to ask just one last question. Just along to all of the panel, if everyone goes from this room and does one thing to prepare for the future, what should it be? Starting with you, Craig.
A lot of talk today about metrics and data. Don't just trust data, trust your gut feel. Great ideas come from gut feelings and pushing forward. I think if we just drill down on data and what we, marketers or ourselves, perceive our readership wants, we don't actually ever offer them anything new. So just trust your gut feel.
John.
I'm going to cheat and say two things. First, an overarching thing, always ask why, no matter what you're trying to do. Why? That's my first thing. The second thing is focus on proving that what you do makes a commercial difference. It's as simple as that.
Mark.
Take the time. Take the time to do all that. We just don't book in enough time, and that's the problem.
I'm going to also have two answers on that. I think first I'm going to give you the girly answer. Be proud. I'm having come out of being in the TV industry for the last 4 years and then come back into publishing. I'm actually really disappointed about how people have, this whole print is dead thing. Paper is dying, but that's not what the product we create. We don't create paper. And let's go back to actually believing in what we do and being proud of the industry we represent, firstly. And actually, I'm just going to leave it at that.
Simon.
I think it's all about focusing on the audience you reach, not the platforms. The platforms should become second to audience and delivering relevant information to them in the way they want it.
As is often the case, just as we're beginning to get going is when we have to wrap it up. So please thank the whole panel, John, Nicole, Simon, Mark and Craig.